Welcome everyone to another episode of Dynamics Corner. This is going to be a fun, integrated conversation. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on November 7th, 2025. Kris. Integrations. Who doesn't need an integration? With all of the systems that are on the market today, and everybody has a little piece of information, you need to have your information integrated. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Dave and Robert from iPass.com. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Doing really well. You guys?
It's Friday. It's going well. And I've always vowed to not record on a Friday, so I don't know what will happen because typically the Fridays turn into some sort of fiasco for me. So we'll do our best today. Hopefully we can.
Here we are.
We can make it through this one okay. But
awesome.
Maybe we should just switch to doing all recordings on Fridays.
Fridays are good for recordings. It's just the day you don't want to push code.
Well, when you do it on Friday. Friday night is usually the best time.
Friday's rough for us because it's like a lot of people want to rush out. You know what I mean? I'm like disconnected already, you know? I'm not even in my normal studio right now.
So, Friday's not a good day to push code. Although I know a lot of people who like to do it on Friday, and I have always been one not to do anything on Friday. The rationale, I try to think of the rationale. I understand it's like, well, there's less risk because you have more time to fix it. But I also go with, well, there's more risk because typically there's less people available.
That's right.
They don't like weekends,
you can schedule to have people available, but sometimes if you push code out there, you don't know if it works or doesn't work. So do you have people waiting all the time? No, because everybody tests everything so thoroughly. So there are never any problems.
Those are the people that don't like weekends. It's the problem. They don't like the weekends.
So we'll see. But thank you both for taking the opportunity to speak with us this afternoon. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Before we jump into the conversation, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, Dave?
Sure. Yeah. So Dave Malda, I'm here at iPass.com. We're in the integration space. And so I've been, in the, let's call it EDI, e-commerce, ERP integration space for around 17, 18 years. So fairly well versed in all the different endpoints, but that doesn't mean there's a day that doesn't go without, learning something new, right? That's what I do love about this. But yeah, I'm joined here with my colleague, Robert. And so we, really play in the a bunch of different ecosystems, including the Microsoft ERP ecosystem. So lots of tenure with the older Dynamics, Nav, AX, SL. Those EP was another popular one, and then of course now it's Dynamics 365 and all the different versions, right? So it's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, great, Robert.
Oh, well, so I'm Robert. I head up partnerships and alliances at iPass.com, and I cut my teeth in the industry in the e-commerce space, and so helped to lead a digital agency for about a decade, brought brands like Swiss Gear and Invicta watches into e-commerce, a lot of cool different B2B and B2C projects, Google Premier Partner Inc. 5000 company, sold in 2017, exited, and from there I headed up partnerships at a different integration platform. Dave and I went from being working at companies that were complementary to being in a bit of conflict, and then I headed up partnerships at a web hosting firm that dealt with a lot of cloud infrastructure and mission critical hosting, and I joined the team here at iPass.com about 2.5 years ago now, and very excited to be joining you today and get to talk a little bit about, as Dave said, where that all comes together with the Microsoft community.
No, that's what I'm looking to hear a little bit more about. It seems that you have a great background on integrations and a breadth of exposure to the dynamic space. So if we could talk a little bit about that. When you talk about integrations, exactly what do you mean by integration?
So for us, it's really about flowing data with your other best-in-class systems, or hopefully best-in-class, right? We all hope that everyone's using the best software for them, but and that's actually one of the challenges, is that getting your systems to talk together so that your finance, operations, sales, marketing, shipping and warehousing and fulfillment, so that the different departments in an organization, every org's a little different, depending on whether they're more services oriented or more retail or wholesale or distribution or manufacturing, whatever sphere they may work in, certainly construction, healthcare, etc. They've got data. They've got customer data, perhaps product and data, order or transaction data of some sort, invoices, things that are happening that are important to other stakeholders in an organization and should be in other systems. And so at the heart of it, it's really about just getting the data flowing, getting it transformed and translated and orchestrated to all the systems it should be in and flowing naturally, so that nobody's waiting on some other team to try to get them what they need, that they've got access to the key information. And more than just people having access, today in the world where you probably don't have a podcast episode that doesn't somehow touch on AI.
Ooh,
right?
I don't know what that word means.
See, okay, this artificial intelligence stuff, it's more important than ever to make sure that you've got not just data, but clean data, having accountability for that data, because with AI, just like with anything else, trash in, trash out, you've got to have the data flowing where it needs to go so that you can benefit from these new systems. And just in general, tech stacks are growing. And so you need to be able to pull together, all these systems so that you've got this unified approach to operations.
Excellent. So iPass, you can integrate external systems to Business Central. We'll call them external systems because I'm a little selfish and I like to call Business Central as the main system, but Business Central could also be ancillary to some other systems. As you had mentioned, many organizations have many different products that they use. As you had mentioned, you want to use the best product for the job that you need to do. And in some times that's not always within Business Central. Believe it or not, I've learned that over my years with it. It's a great product, feature rich, does wonders for it, but sometimes you'd have integrations with other systems.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you were to think about, for instance, e-commerce, if you're thinking about where the biggest brands are growing, it's with platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce and Magento and Adobe Commerce and Shopware and so forth. And, it gives you just an idea of, there are these other software ecosystems out there that businesses are reliant on, but that need to be interoperable. So I'm with you, but the ERP really is the anchor. No doubt about that. Business Central is at the heart. Yep. But we would, at iPass.com, iPass stands for Integration Platform as a Service. And what's funny is that if you were to look at how our system operates, we become the hub. We're the glue between everything. We're kind of the pipes. And so, in a diagram, you'd see, when we're involved, you'd see us in the middle with one integration into somebody's Business Central instance, being able to transform and translate data with myriad other systems all at once, and it's kind of a one-to-many.
So with that integrations, you mentioned that it integrates with Business Central. I'll take it back from the ERP because I have questions on the other side, but the ERP software with Business Central, does it work with Business Central online or Business Central on premises, or both?
Yes. So really what we're dealing with is API connectivity. And so if we can reach the APIs of Business Central, the application programming interface, to basically get data in and out, then we're golden. And that's really what it's about for us. So we, for instance, we actually work with Nav, what was Navision back in the day. Same premise that, if it's an on-prem, sometimes there's a few steps to go through to whitelist some IPs and get proper access. But at the end of the day, as long as iPass.com as a platform can communicate with the APIs, we're in great shape.
Okay. And do you have a standard list of APIs as part of Business Central that you add as part of this experience with the integrations?
Yes.
When someone goes to the implementation?
Yes. And so the way that our platform is built, every integration that we have that's already built is in our marketplace and actually lists out all the supported data flows that are already available. We have an SDK for people that need to expand and deal with things that are more custom. In some cases, for users, we'll just go and add support for an additional API endpoint here or there, and expand upon the integration that's already available. But absolutely, that and with a system like Business Central, you'll typically see a mix of, and obviously there are layers to these kinds of data as you deal with the relationships between companies and customers and products, and as it relates to inventory and prices, and if we're thinking about orders as it relates to invoices and shipments and so on and so forth, that we'll have all those sorts of data flows ready to rock and roll.
And so you have templates ready for them then. So for people that want to integrate something really quickly, they have a good standard to stand on, and then be able to easily add more data points.
Exactly. So for instance, you'll have, when you spin up those templates, so there's kind of the integration itself, which is handling the API communications and being that translator on that side to, okay, what's the API in Business Central and where is that going in iPass.com? And then we've got mapping templates, and mapping we think of as, okay, this field needs to go to that field, and what might need to happen in between, what kind of translation or transformations. We're a no-code to low-code system, so sometimes it's just first name over here has to go to given name over there. Sometimes you need to do more things to split data apart, append data together, or do other things to work with the data and get it ready for whatever system it's trying to go into, so that it's properly formatted and it's going to be successful. But in that process, we've got, for each integration, templates of the common fields that we anticipate running into most often. And so if I'm thinking about product data, you can imagine fields like the product name, description, SKU, price, inventory, sorts of things. But then somebody that's selling, let's say, cell phones, they might have fields of data about how many gigabytes is the phone, and what carriers does it work with, and what screen size, and so on and so on. They might have 100 fields like that. We provide a no to low code way of mapping those fields and getting those additional pieces of data flowing. And so you're kind of getting something where we hope in most cases you're about 70% of the way there when you turn it on. Sometimes you're 100% of the way there. But you can build upon it. There's an inherent flexibility built in. So it's meant to be a springboard, but not to be a black box.
No, I understand. So you connect to the Business Central APIs. You have the ability to enhance those APIs. If you have a Business Central, a lot of implementations have extensions that add additional fields or even additional tables that they may need to use. So you have a mapping tool that allows you to integrate to the APIs that are visible within Business Central. So that kind of covers that. And then you talked about you have a mapping tool in data transformation. Where does that take place? Does that take place on Business Central side? Does that take place in the iPass.com platform?
It takes place in the iPass.com platform. So you're able to log in. You're able to see all of this in nice, neat user interfaces, and you're able to adjust. And so it makes it easier in that sense to think about what each system that you're integrating needs, and what data you're flowing to and from each system. And so if you can imagine flowing with Business Central with e-commerce, point of sale, CRM, product information management systems, shipping and fulfillment systems like warehouse management, order management, 3PL, dealing with all sorts of myriad types of software, HR systems like UKG, or sales tax exemption certificate management with Avalara, or that we get into a lot of different types of integrations. But in that way, by having that one grand central station where it's being managed, you're not dealing with all sorts of one-off connectors that you're trying to maintain independently and monitor independently, and really debug independently. Because from my experience, the hardest part of dealing with data integration over time isn't when things work properly. It's when data doesn't get where it's supposed to go. And that's where,
Yes.
for us, we're a queue-based system. Data comes in, it processes. If there's any issue with the data, we automatically retry on a schedule. It doesn't get lost. We notify you so that you know what's going on and give you a bit of a root cause analysis. And the same process is happening on the way out to each receiving system. And so, for instance, we might get an order coming down from an e-commerce website that needs to go to Business Central for accounting, to some kind of warehouse management system for fulfillment, to a CRM so the sales team has visibility, etc. And maybe it's going to go to 2 out of 3 systems successfully, but one of them, like there was that AWS outage a couple of weeks ago, and so maybe it's unavailable for a while. We'll keep automatically retrying until it's successful. Or maybe there's an issue where one of the fields, there's just too many characters to go into whatever the receiving system is, and so 2 of them worked fine, but one of them didn't. Now you know what's going on and you can see it, and it's not just a matter of, oh, that order didn't get fulfilled, and waiting for a shopper to call saying, where's my stuff? Our system is purpose built to really bring a lot more accountability, visibility, and control to the whole process, and to minimize the long-term expense of trying to maintain all of these. Our integrations to all these systems are maintained in our marketplace. So, if, let's say, Shopify or BigCommerce is changing their APIs, which we see from time to time, our users don't have to go and rewrite these connectors. That we're doing it, and there's version control. They can just switch to something new, and go to version 1.8 of that integration, and not have to take on that burden of things breaking, or having to spend all that money in what I'd consider R&D, reinventing the wheel.
So this is more of a central hub for managing the data integrations. And you'd mentioned that you can work with multiple sources simultaneously in a bidirectional manner.
Yes.
And you also pointed out that you track the data flow because, again, if you have product data going from one system to many disparate systems, and if you have an error with one, you'll retry and do that. With the data, is it a pass-through for the data through this service that you have, or is there any data residing in the iPass.com platform?
So we are an actual data hub. And in that way, as for instance, there are going to be communications happening in an order fulfillment situation. It's a great example where an order is going to maybe come into Business Central from a sales channel to be fulfilled. But then as items are fulfilled, maybe there's a split shipment, right? There's going to be a partial shipment happening. We need to keep updating. And so it keeps that together as sort of an amalgamated source of truth. And so you can keep dealing with the updates that way. And it's really what powers a lot of the one-to-many and gives a lot more intelligence to the whole process. So as opposed to just point-to-point connectors and getting data from A to B, we are really thinking about the life cycle of the data. And so, and there are times when data is kind of, splicing together from multiple systems. And so, for instance, we might have an organization that has a big product catalog that sells in multiple regions and different languages, perhaps, or under different brands. And they are going to use a product information management system like Pimcore or Akeneo to manage their product data as it relates to how to categorize the data and all the attributes and tags and additional information, images in a digital asset management system. And so the source of truth of the inventory and pricing might always be Business Central. That's not necessarily going to happen in a PIM like a Kenio or PIMcore, but in iPass.com, there's one record for that product, and you're getting all of the information about that product coming together in one system. So at that point, it's stitched together and ready to go wherever it needs to go, as opposed to thinking about having to get, different fields coming together separately. And then, for instance, how do you even build a product into some systems if it doesn't have pricing or inventory, or if it doesn't have some of these other fields? We give that natural place to bring it all together.
That's excellent. I do have a question, kind of a not so much of a left field, but from the world of consulting and implementing Business Central. With your tool being an integration tool, have others used it, not just moving, integrating data, having data applications talk to each other, but more of so like moving or migrating data. So for example, if someone's coming from a nav system that wants to upgrade a Business Central, have you had people use it to do a data migration on top of the other things that they're going to integrate anyway?
So yes and no. We have features as a data hub to manually sync pieces of data, to reactivate data, do more of a bigger catch up on getting data into a system, to look for unmatched data between systems. You can use us to seed data into a system. What it's going to come down to is, if I'm thinking about going from, let's say, Nav to Business Central, are we set up to move all of the types of data that are needed for that user wholesale and move them kind of, bi-directionally, or would you need to set up certain things? Because we'll normally think of the ERP as the source of truth of certain data, and so maybe the source of it, but not the destination, for instance. And so there are cases where some data, like moving customer records from one to the other, pretty straightforward. Trying to move certain data, like maybe, I don't know, I'll make it up here, certain types of purchase orders or something, we might be set up for more of a one directional, and there would be effort to be able to bridge that gap. I'd also say that, while our goal is to be, a quick implementation, our bigger focus is the total cost of ownership, is the ability to turn on new spokes to the hub, to minimize the maintenance, to minimize the fires that need to put out with old, reactive kind of situations with connectors that were strung together. And so there's still implementation work. And if you're not going to continue to use the product, if you were just using it as a migration product, you might be better off just, formatting the data more manually, moving it more manually. So we do consult on opportunities like that and look at, are we the best solution to help with that portion of a project? And with a migration, could be yes, could be no.
Yeah, no, I thought about that because, certainly in many cases, someone that moves to Business Central, there's more likely a high chance that they're going to be integrating to other solution. So if someone was to invest in moving from Nav to Business Central, and at the same time they have e-commerce that they want to integrate, it would make sense. They can still, they could utilize the product itself to get some of the heavy lifting, because that's always a challenge for implementation, is like, how do you move the data from one ERP system to another, and at the same time having that consistency of perhaps they want to get e-commerce, CRM, and all the other integrations they want to do. They can still certainly benefit from utilizing iPass in that sense. So,
and I'll take it a step further. So if you're thinking about turning on a new e-commerce website, as an organization using, let's say, Business Central, or moving to Business Central, often you've got to think about, well, how is your product data going to get into the e-commerce site? Because the source of truth, and typically that's going to be us. And that's important to us because, back to stitching things together, that brings more accountability, so that we know when an order is coming back from the e-commerce site, it's going to match perfectly with whatever SKU is in Business Central. That we're not worried about, somebody manually is adding these items into the e-commerce website, and now there are going to be mismatches and orders are going to be failing to flow successfully to the ERP for fulfillment and accounting. And so we do see situations where just naturally, even if it wasn't part of somebody's initial project plan, as they start to scope out how the integrations are going to happen, they're going to realize that some of that data is going to come through us as a best practice, and they shouldn't do it manually or through some external process.
Yeah, I just thinking about from a investment perspective, or if you're moving your data to Business Central and you have a PIM solution that you have to populate that, you're doing it in kind of one process rather than doing the Business Central and then you got to figure out from Business Central to your PIM solution. In this case, you can do it to, hey, I'm going to populate these things anyway, coming from a source. Might as well do it in one process.
Yeah, and that's what we like to see, is people thinking more about their entire data ecosystem and thinking about the long term, and not so much just trying to think about, reactively how to put a band-aid on it, how do they minimally get these things talking. And that's where we see different outcomes that just become possible, that by unifying these sorts of systems, that, for instance, for retailers dealing with point of sale, that they'll have e-commerce, and their e-commerce will be hooked up to their marketing stack, and their marketing stack will know all of the shoppers' online history, but it won't know what they bought in store when. And so you'll see brands that are emailing people or sending text messages, hey, you haven't come to the store in a while, we haven't seen you in a while, here's a coupon. It's like, they were at a brick and mortar store yesterday making a purchase. And you just see these silos that that don't have to be broken down on day one, but being able to turn on another spoke to the hub and just get that data flowing now to the marketing stack, that becomes powerful. Or I mentioned Avalara earlier. I wouldn't say it's one of our most common integrations, but if you can imagine, the people that are often talking to customers about their orders and sales tax exemption certificates, if you're dealing with wholesale or nonprofit or government or what have you, that they're not usually the people that are in the Avalara account and that can see, or they're necessarily in the ERP and can see if there's an exemption certificate on file, when it might be expiring. We can expose that data to the CRM, where the sales and account management teams have access, where the people that are sitting in the call center can say, oh yeah, that's expired. Oh yeah, nope, we have that on file already. And so it's just some of those things that cut down on a lot of that internal, transferring and back and forth and delay.
I just want to rewind to something that you had started talking about. So it's a central hub for data, and you can connect disparate systems, so you can have pieces of information from many sources. So if you have item information, Business Central has certain item fields, characteristics or fields, whatever you like to call them, on an item that may or may not be relevant for an e-commerce site, or they may not have a place for an e-commerce site. An e-commerce site may have some information. A PIM may have additional information. So you can bring all of that together and then distribute the relevant information to the systems with the information that they need only, correct? Now, another thing, thinking about this, with it being a data hub, and I've had my fair share of integrations, I can assure you, probably more than you care to remember at some points. And it's almost because here in 2025, everybody wants systems that talk with each other, and it's becoming easier and easier as technology advances, and has been over the past several years. Can you also filter the data that goes to each system? For example, I could have a Shopify store 1 that is just specifically for my wholesalers, a Shopify store 2 that's just for retailers. My product may be different because of the nature of the business or the nature of who I'm selling it to. And there may be different pricing, or there may be different pieces of information that have to go to the different sources. So can you route it based upon some sort of filtering mechanism or security mechanism to keep the data from flowing into systems that shouldn't?
not only can you set rules to decide which systems are going to receive that data, you can also use our rules engine to decide which data is going to go through which transformations and translations. And so let's say in your the situation that you lined out in your example, where different storefronts, it might be that when you're dealing with different sales channels, some might be B2B and some might be B2C, and that data may need to be treated a little bit differently. So not only about where to publish it or where to send it, but how does it need to transform and translate in route?
That's great. And as far as the storage is concerned, when I hear of data hubs, I'm used to Business Central. Everyone talks about Business Central and the data storage and the data space. How is the space allotted for this platform for a customer?
So we're providing, as a SaaS platform, individual accounts for users that, and our pricing's up on our website. We're proud to have transparency around it, where we're charging based upon the number of pieces of software. Yeah, it's rare in the integration space. A lot of places, you've got to have 3 PhDs and consult your crystal ball to figure it out.
I won't even go down that road of
sign your life
like
away.
You said. I swear.
Yeah,
I swear, as much as I love Business Central and the whole Microsoft platform and all that, I swear you could have 2 full-time people that work just strictly with Microsoft licensing, and they wouldn't understand it if that even was their job 24 hours a day. So I do, as Kris had stated, I do like the transparency.
And easy to understand, so...
Yeah. So ours is based upon the number of pieces of software that you're integrating. And so basically we're counting those, if you want to think about it like API connections. So if you have one instance of Business Central, that's one integration. If you've got one instance of Magento or Adobe Commerce or BigCommerce or Shopware, whatever e-com, that's another. But to us, now those e-commerce platforms, you might have 6 storefronts running out of it, right? That we're not counting how many brands you're operating or such. We're just thinking about how many instances of the software. And so our initial plan starts at a flat $500 a month, and that includes unlimited data throughput. So we're not nickel and diming for the API calls, the bandwidth, the storage, the number of admin users that you want, to have access to the ipass.com account, to the number of data flows between the systems that you want to start flowing a variety of different data, no problem. We're simply looking at the number of integrations, and then there are a few add-ons that you can tack on if you want a sandbox account, because you want to hook that up to a dev or staging environment. You can get that, at a rate and such, and all that information, like I say, is published and readily available. So we find that that's really advantageous. Now, I mean, for somebody that's, if we're talking to a Fortune 500, we're going to be dealing with a single tenant implementation that we're going to quote out more uniquely. But we've had, huge organizations using our multi-tenant SaaS, groups like Nintendo, the Cleveland Cavs, the Minnesota Wild, the Air Force. So we're really consistent in the absolute, the 99% of our users being able to utilize that multi-tenant SaaS pricing.
Okay, so you had gotten into some other points, because I was also going to start talking about the throughput and the performance, but you had mentioned, and it sounds in the conversation that you had just had, you can have multi-tenancy or single tenancy if your implementation requires it because of the volume of transactions that you have, or maybe the number of connections. So you have some flexibility there.
We've got our SOC 2,
well,
et cetera, but if somebody's InfoSec team, that they are going to require something a little different, we can deal with that as a one-off, of course.
No, I like these integrations with the mappings, because, as I had mentioned, there's so many integrations that are occurring today, and everybody seems to want to create them from I don't use the word from scratch. It's my Northeastern vocabulary here. So as far as going through the implementation and setting this up, and you mentioned you have some templates. What do in the templates again? Just I understand the concept, and I'm sure a lot that work with business. They're intended to get you started.
Right.
You may, as you had mentioned, you may get everything that you need, but you may have some uniqueness to your business that you may need to make some adjustments for this. And that adjustment process, how is that typically handled? Do you do that adjustment process? Does the customer do that adjustment process? Does the partner do that adjustment process? How does somebody go about having some of those uniquenesses of their business put into this platform for them to distribute the information or receive the information?
So our platform, there's obviously, there's training modules and there's information on how to administrate and implement and such. And that's all pretty fast, rapid kind of training and information. But we know that the average organization, they don't have the bandwidth to take that on, even if it's a smaller project. That the idea of building the project plan, asking the right stakeholders, making sure it's understood what are the business processes that are underlying these integrations. What does success look like at the end? Building out that project plan, thinking about, what do the baseline integrations in the marketplace do and what needs to be supplemented there, what additional fields of data need to be mapped, and then most importantly, testing. So to us, every project, even something that's going to use really more off the shelf, what's in the templates should go through some UAT, some user acceptance testing, thinking about not only the most common, but also some edge cases. And that's where, you'll find that organizations forget things that have been customized in some of their software, or that there's some field of data that was missed, or that there was a typo somewhere. All that should ideally be caught in that process. And so working with a services provider, or might be depending on their area of expertise, we've got over 80 of these agencies, SIs, VARs, consultancies, and other service providers in our partner network, and that number just keeps growing. They can come in and they can provide the resources that are going to be great at overseeing the project and making sure everything is successful and that it gets done within a reasonable timeline, where often people that are trying to self-implement, everybody's got finite resources and most people in an organization already have full plates. And so trying to get, people to do this internally, could they? Yes. If they have the time, absolutely. But we always prefer starting from the concept of, can you pull in experts that can guide you through it and make sure it's a really, really successful experience. And from there, figure out, what could be done internally to cut down on any services cost. And how do you marry together having, these folks consult and having your internal team do certain things. But nonetheless, you can kind of go in either direction. But we find that our team is going to be responsible for the uptime, the security of the platform, the general features and evolution of our platform as a system. But we leave it to the partner network to be able to provide that services layer and deal with the unique needs of people's individual businesses and the unique issues of their data and data hygiene and what have you.
I understand that that all makes sense to me. I mean, working with implementations, it is great to have somebody who understands your business working with it. And I'm happy that you hit upon some key points. I could, I tell everybody I could go and redo some landscaping in my yard. I would love to do it, but I would do it at night because I still have to work during the day. It would take much longer to get done. So sometimes that self-implementation, if you have the availability, is great to do, but sometimes you can get also done a lot quicker if you have somebody who understands what needs to do. And, to be quite blunt, it's their job.
Right.
It's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to show up, get it done, and then support and maintain and work with you through the rest of the journey. But it gets you off the ground faster than maybe transition some of that over to you so that you can manage it if you have the time.
And you might want to call them in every now and then that maybe some data fails to flow and there's an API error that we're reporting from a system that, some systems provide really detailed information when data failures happen about, why the character length was too long, or the there was a basically there's a question mark in a number field, or or there's some, or maybe an API key expired with some system. Sometimes it's just it's a pretty bland failure and you don't know why, and somebody needs to dig in a little bit. Our system you don't have to recreate the error, you don't have to look for a needle in a haystack. Not only does it let you know, but it will show you all the payloads between the APIs. It'll show you all the communications. You can trace where the issue arose, but not every user wants to do that on their own. And so this is where, day-to-day operations, mapping a new field, maybe the end user does that for themselves. Something that gets a little bit more complex in debugging, maybe they want to call in the cavalry.
That's good. I understand that. No, I like the flexibility of that as well. And as far as the templates, how many do you have now within your template portfolio as sort of the get started kit? So you had mentioned Business Central. I'm hearing a number of names: Shopify, Business Central, Avalara.
Oh, Dave, do you have a good number off the top of your head? Or dozens and dozens, but
it's definitely growing daily and weekly. To pin a
It's probably around 60
number,
if I had to guess off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Because we've been adding a lot, and at any given time we're working on several new ones.
I think too, Brad, what's really interesting is over the last couple of months, there's been a real appetite for partners, we call them MISPs in our network, that are looking to write integrations to our platform, right? So these may be, sometimes there may be one-off endpoints or systems that are needed in a specific project, but sometimes they're very common ones that partners would like to write integrations for. We would certify that in our marketplace, and then it becomes available to everybody, right? So that's one of the real advantages of kind of our platform, and let's call it the flywheel, where as we build and as our partners build, it just sort of starts to pick up velocity and become more and more valuable sort of week over week, right? So
no, I understand that. So partners can also create connectors for their customers to use to make it easier to integrate their system with an ERP system. I'm a little selfish. I always talk about ERP, but
and I'll take it a step further. So these integrations in our marketplace acts a bit like an app store. We've written the vast majority of these integrations, but when partners list them, that's the last piece of the pricing that you'd see on the pricing page. If a partner can list an integration as being free, they can also add a monthly fee. It's just a line item on the ipass.com invoice that our clients receive, that our subscribers receive. But in that way, for instance, there's currently two where there's a fee. One is another ERP, I know, boo. But Sugar CRM would be another $125 a month if somebody wanted to integrate with it. And that makes our marketplace more scalable, because what you'll find is that if you try to box it all into one platform like us being responsible for writing and maintaining every integration, it slows everything down. And with us, every integration is a universal translator to our hub and is interoperable with all these other integrations that are in our marketplace. So it really does improve our value proposition very quickly as we're adding these. But to the point, sometimes you just if you need to integrate 5 pieces of software for somebody, 4 of them might be in the marketplace, and 1 of them may need to be written with our SDK, and maybe it's a bespoke piece of software or something end of life, or something that we would never commercially be out there adding, with the expectation of selling in droves, right? But you can still, pay someone from our partner network, one of these service providers, to write that integration, and then it's going through all the error handling. It can talk to all these other systems, and all these other integrations are being maintained so that you don't have to. And so there's still all that value proposition of being able to map new fields and manage everything from a low-code interface. And it's a mock system, so it's built. This is where I get even more nerdy, right? But it's built with microservices, API first. It's cloud-based and it's headless. And so that is to say we auto-scale in the cloud. We're built on top of Azure. And so, there are a lot of different microservices running. If one of them starts to get a little bit high in resource usage, we automatically spin up more copies and balance the load. And so we're prepared to deal with big bursts of data. Our system actually, we've got a lot of features to make sure that we don't overwhelm everyone's third-party software, that we don't overwhelm their e-commerce website or their CRM or whatever other systems. But aside from thinking about it in that way, it's also, you were mentioning earlier, dealing with organizations that have multiple brands, multiple storefronts, different things. Our interface is really nice. We love demoing it because it's it's very modern and it's very intuitive. But there are cases where, let's say you're dealing with a manufacturer that needs to hook up something with 1,000 distributors, or a franchise with 1,000 franchisees. You may not want to manually deal with turning on data flows with 1,000 Shopify stores, or 1,000 point of sale instances for each franchisee that's got their own data going back to the franchise to calculate royalties or push product catalog information or whatever it may be. You can script it all with us. And basically, when you're in our interface, when you click buttons, you're basically calling APIs. You can just write a script to communicate with those same APIs. You don't need to do it 1,000 times, just script it and let it run. And so there are a lot of different scenarios that we run into depending on the size of an org and what they need to achieve, where sometimes there is going to be some coding to be done in order to really achieve what they need. But I haven't seen a better way out there, right? I'm used to seeing people have to really, set something up 1,000 times versus how they could do it with us.
Oh, in 2025, I still see that. So it's good to automate some of that stuff. I'll ask you. It's a loaded question, but it's not a loaded question. But it's something that if someone's looking for solutions, they talk about. And I know, and just so that everyone also is hopefully aware that there isn't a one size fits all. Every organization's different. Every integration's different. Every piece is different. But what would you say is the average time to implement a connection to a system with Business Central? Yeah, and again, I understand that's variability based upon which information you're integrating, if there's any customizations. I just understanding some variables. But just if you had to say, a typical implementation. Right. Minor enhancements, minor modifications. How quickly can someone get working with this?
Right. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. If we were talking about moving some customer data between Business Central and a marketing system like MailChimp, Digital, or Klaviyo, or a CRM like HubSpot or something that maybe you put 10 hours in, maybe 20 in a more complex project, and that's including, in my head at least, project planning and testing and so on, soup to nuts. Make that, and that's me having enough buffer in there for the unusual. That's an expectation. If I was dealing with a complex B2B e-commerce situation where there's a lot of data flows of customer data, product data, order data, quotes, and so on and so forth, gift card data flowing in there somewhere, whatever it may be, I could easily see an average being more like 100 hours, perhaps more, depending again on the specs, how many product, fields need to be mapped, how many, how many storefronts are there. That we do see projects on our platform that certainly take hundreds of hours, but if I'm trying to think about a more average, somebody that's got, Business Central and, a big commerce website, and they need to get these things hooked up, I'd be hoping to see a project like that in dozens of hours, maybe and again, my foot fits really well in my mouth. I know from life experience, every project is different. I don't know how many more ways I can protect myself, but
no, I understand. That's why I said it's a loaded
60
question.
hours is probably a good starting point for a very complete, thorough project that's been properly tested and such. But again, somebody that's just going to turn on some basic data flows that we already have and get their inventory and pricing and what have you syncing and some order data flowing, they could do it in a few hours.
That's good. No, I know it's a very difficult question. I had to ask that because
I'll get partners and clients, calling me saying, "What are you talking about? This project that we just did was more." We see it.
It's the same thing with an ERP implementation. I always have to ask that question because I get asked that question quite often. How long will it take? And again, it's like, how long is a piece of string? But again, you still can say that based upon a certain size or a certain integration, you can expect, as you had mentioned, if it's a larger implementation, it could be a couple weeks. If it's a very standard or simplistic implementation, it could be a couple days.
Yeah,
so,
and look,
it's all a matter of what you're scoping on.
I've seen people, I hate to say it, but I've seen people take a year on an implementation with us, but typically they're launching other software in the midst of that. Not everything was ready for us. It's not like they came in and said, "Oh, it's let's implement iPass.com. Everything is ready. We're just going to stitch this together." They've got bigger projects happening in the midst of all of it that we're the glue in between, but you can't finish implementing and testing your data flows until your other software is ready. So there's kind of a there's a safety net there that I'm throwing myself in terms of from the time that all of your fields are ready, that you're ready to really implement, it can be pretty rapid. But you've got to get your ducks in a row as part of the project as well.
Oh yes, you have to assume that the systems are in place. It's pretty difficult to integrate with a system that's not there. So
you'd be surprised that, and sometimes it's good that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so sometimes you've got people starting to put data in, and they're not wrong for wanting to start testing. In fact, we like that. They just don't realize that they're not going to be able to really go through full user acceptance testing until everything is really in place, or at least. But in many cases, we love to see people testing each flow as those fields are ready and that data is ready. So it's kind of a hybrid where ideally you're doing these things in lockstep, but until you get to the end, imagine, you want to see orders coming over successfully, but the product data is not ready. Well, you're not really testing everything end to end. You've gotten, 90% of the way there, let's say, but there may still be some touch up at the end when you get everything really, really together.
I know, Brad, in a previous life, this has caused me to, it's probably a little bit of PTSD, but there was, I remember a couple of projects that, where the website was being built out and we didn't have a strong, okay, when you're done and things are ready for production, then we'll start. This was kind of like one of these piecemeal implementations, and it was pretty painful because weekly there would be things that would be either added on or custom fields added, and when you're trying to integrate that, it's like a moving target, right? So yeah, lots of fun.
Yeah. I've lived through those.
That's implementers.
Kris may know about that type of yes. You go through some implementations. You have by the way, we forgot to do this. Oh, we didn't talk about that scenario.
Yeah.
So
there's always
it's the challenges of it.
The bigger the project, the more the scope creep at the end, and we find that there's no malice 99.9% of the time, right? Nobody intended for that to happen, but until you start to test things, they don't realize all the things that were never discussed, that were never documented, that nobody ever mentioned were going to be requirements, and well, now there's more work to be done. So we absolutely see that, and we believe that especially, sizable projects, they should have, and that's where I go back to, I think the most important part of the whole process is the testing phase, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And we don't really have a lot of fear about iPass.com as a platform being able to perform. We know it can perform. It's really a matter of what's being thrown out of left field and what's left there between the service provider and so on to be able to address that last mile. And in some cases, we even the integrations in our marketplace, as I mentioned earlier, that they support a variety of data flows. There might be something that now they want to hook up to a system and they want to get some data flowing with it in a certain direction that we don't yet support. And so now, there are cases where we might be able to, rush that through our dev team and make available. There are other cases where we might have to point toward our SDK and suggest, well, you should write something supplemental for that. But those are the kinds of things. It's the that 11th hour stuff that gets you.
Yeah, it's excellent. Well, Dave, Robert, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this afternoon and tell us all about iPass.com and how it can enhance someone's integration to many different systems, not just Business Central, which is I like the flexibility and to be able to have the interconnectivity with many systems and to have it much easier. I mean, with Business Central having the ability to have APIs and custom APIs, it's nice to have something that can consume it on the other side to help them integrate with other systems instead of having specific solutions for each one of those.
And
if someone wanted to learn more about yes, and the transparency. If someone wanted to learn more about iPass, what's the best way that they could learn a little bit more about it?
Dave, I'll throw it to you.
The easiest way, go to iPass.com. Lots of information on there, including the pricing, lots of developer tools and other information, including like the marketplace. So what, integrations are available, which MISP partners are part of our network. But also you could reach out via email, or Robert and I are both fairly active on LinkedIn as well. So certainly connect and DM us there, or dave.malda@ipass.com. In Robert's case, robert.rand@ipass.com. More than happy to help.
And that's iPass with IPAAS.com.
Yes,
Integration
that's
platform as a service. Yeah. And,
no,
and
it's
people
great. I like it.
Yeah, they can book a meeting right through our website. So we try to make that really easy because we know seeing is understanding, and we're always happy to walk people through the tech.
Oh, great. It sounds like an amazing product. And thank you again for your time. Speak with us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Ciao,
Take care,
ciao.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is DVLPRLIFE.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.